that was weird. It just stopped.
Yes, it
Hello
did.
and welcome to the Big 12 Mafia Show. I'm your host, Nathan Bomber Brown, and with me is Vince from let me make sure I get this right, Garnet and Old, right? It's not
Garnet
Garnet
and
and
Old.
Gold.
Garnet and Old. That's
I
correct.
I appreciate you joining me today. He's from Florida State, and I'll give him some time to sort of explain what they do on their show and what they cover. We're trying to do a tour of universities across the country. Not any one thing matters. It's really what people are thinking about in their neck of the woods, and I'm trying to broaden my horizons, and also the people that have watched my show because there's a lot of stuff, especially east of the Mississippi, we don't know much about, and I'm the first one to admit that. Before we get started, I want to do a few kickoff things. First of all, Coug Connect, that little QR code in the upper right hand corner. If you're a BYU fan, we're looking for NIL money for the University of Brigham Young, and we need that really bad. We're behind major we're even behind minor powers that if you want to compete, as Vince is putting his head up and down, you have to have NIL money. And so I'm encouraging everybody to sign up with Coug Connect. Take your cell phone, scan that QR code, and sign up. You can do it as cheap as $10, and I really encourage you to do that. The other thing is please subscribe. Give us a thumbs up, both me and Vince, on Twitter, and follow us. And then if you want to be part of the show and you want to do talk back quite a bit, super chats are always welcome. I try to get to everybody's new messages, but super chats stand out. And then, of course, if you're a subscriber, all your comments and suggestions are also, I try to read on every show. Okay, let's go ahead and start off. Vince, tell us who you are and what you and Ryan do, and tell us about your show. I'm going to bring up your page while you're talking.
Yeah, that's fine. First of all, thank you for inviting me on. We've been talking about this for a while, and this feels like the Your College Sports Connection kind of car wash thing, right? We're all going through the car wash. But it's really exciting to be on a show, everybody else's shows. Gives me a chance to broaden my horizons, just like you said. But just to kind of level set, Ryan and I were coworkers for years, and we ended up, chatting about Florida State often at work. Both fans, both from different eras. I was at Florida State during a much better era than Ryan was. And we decided, actually, we didn't decide. Somebody said to us one time, we're tired of hearing about you guys talking about the Noles. You should start your own podcast.
Right.
Right. And the way that comes about is, technology is easy. And the way you can go about this is easy. So the tricky thing is to have some stuff to say. Right. And so what Ryan and I do is we've been doing this for 3 years now. We don't claim to have all the connections. We do not claim to have any inside information per se, but we have enough collaborative information that we get outside that we think we have a fan perspective that's a little bit deeper than just water cooler talk. So that's how it started, and here we are 3 years later. And Garnet and Old is the name of the show. And the name comes from the fact that my daughter thinks that I'm old, and we were looking for a name for the show.
I like it.
And she said, "Well, what about Garnet and Old?" And she was kind of like digging at me there, and I'm like, you know what? That's perfect. So I'm the old one of the duo, and I graduated from Florida State in 1994. So, but that's the premise of the show. We do a weekly show. And we also have some other stuff coming up this fall where we're going to be doing some more pregame, halftime stuff, and also doing some live remote shows at a local brewery here in Jacksonville, Florida.
What's the name of that brewery?
The name of the brewery is Fishweir, Fishweir. And so if any of your listeners, any of your subscribers happen to live in the Northeast Florida area, it is a very popular local brewery here. And Ryan and I will be doing our live show from there for 2 games this fall for the away games.
So Florida State, I got to tell you, I grew up with. So I'm 53 in September. So Deion Sanders, I was just out of high school, in college when Deion was doing his thing, and it was that was some of the sexiest football I think I've ever seen in my life. The brand of football, the players that you had, your quarterbacks, everybody, your defense was tough. It was admirable, right? And everybody wanted Bobby Bowden always was number 2 in the country. It seemed like
Right.
kicker, you couldn't win a national championship, but you were in what? How many 4 championship games? I want to say you
We were,
were against
yeah,
Nebraska and lost those, and it was a
yeah.
tough time. But I think Florida State just runs a great operation.
We're very proud of it for sure, just like all fans are, right? We're very proud of what we do, and we don't believe we do anything wrong, just like every other fan group out there. But that, I mean, obviously, we had a lot of success. We had a lot of lack of success early on in the history of the program. Then Bobby Bowden shows up, and then it's just Katie bar the door. And so, for a program as young as Florida State is, it's typically half the age of most of the blue bloods.
Right.
But for the things that they've been able to accomplish in that short a time, Bobby Bowden, architecting all of that, we're pretty, like I said, we're pretty young fan base,
Right.
as far as the history and everything. But yeah, I was there actually, Dion had just left when I got to Florida State.
Okay.
Dion actually played at a rival high school of mine, and so
Oh, wow.
Dion did not do any favors to my high school team, but we all love Dion to a certain degree, and there's some things that we don't necessarily care about with Dion, but he is one of the greatest football players to ever don the pads,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
and he is to be looked at in that realm. Anyway, yeah.
I think everything you said, completely agree with. One thing I really another affinity is Bobby Bowden and Lavelle Edwards were contemporaries, and they absolutely respected those two guys were hooked at the hip. Every Senior Bowl, every time they went to the Hula Bowl and had seniors, they seemed to be constantly on the lines against each other, and I know they were great friends. If there's one thing that you take from Bobby Bowden's time, his legacy, the championships that you guys have won. What's the one endearing thing that makes you proud to be a Florida State Seminole?
I mean, he did everything with grace and class, and unless you were a hated rival that looked for the most minutia to point at him and look for some kind of black cloud.
Right.
He did everything with grace and class, and he had just unbelievable ability to connect with people. And I have personal stories about that. I spent my time at Florida State as a member of the Marching Chiefs. So I'm a musician, and Bobby took a great liking and a great care of the Marching Chiefs at Florida State. And so, I had a connection with him that was not just he was my coach. I met him several times. My kids sat on his lap, and he remembers, and he remembered me from decades before.
Right.
I mean, you have to have that built into you, and not everybody does. I don't have that, and so for someone to be able to have that kind of ability to connect with people and to match faces with names and be genuine about it. I mean, you can't help but they always talked about him being the great closer when it comes to recruiting. That's because he could get into the house in the last minute and make immediate connections with mom and dad or grandma and grandpa or whoever, and that was a done deal. And now, obviously, we know recruiting's different now, right?
It is, yeah.
But at that time, you just had to put him in front of people, and he won recruiting battles more than he lost.
I hate to move on from this because I could trade war stories with you forever. Florida State, I just want anybody who ever is watching this show to know they're high on my list of top universities. When you look going east to west, I would easily put Florida State and Notre Dame right at the top. I like Miami. I like the brash of Miami. I was in high school and junior high when they were, coming up in the 80s. And so
Coming out of the smoke.
there was a lot of that was entertaining, right? But Florida State, and I think you used the right word, it's class. And that you couldn't have had more opposite approaches to winning games, Miami and Florida State. So it was easy to be a fan of the Florida State. Plus, I love the chop in the song that you guys do during the game. I mean, I think that's just overwhelming. I've always wanted BYU to have something like that. I'm sure you being in the band, I bet you really like it.
Yeah, it annoys the bejesus out of everyone else, the opposing team. But you probably are paying attention to this too. This is like list season and countdown season and all this kind of stuff. And on Twitter or wherever it is you are, you're doing these lists of the top 50 this and the top 25 that. And one of the things that always comes out is, what are the greatest traditions in college football? And of course I'm biased, and I spent a lot of my formative years there. But I will say, just in general, college football in general, sometimes I see those polls and those lists and I go, yeah, man, I would love to be at a game to see that. Right. I would love to go to Penn State for a whiteout game. Right. I would love,
exactly.
I would love to go to Oklahoma to watch, the schooner tip over. I would love to experience those things. I've never been one to degrade another team's tradition because everybody takes that so, deep in their soul.
Very much.
There's a lot of great ones. The chop is one of them. The war chant.
I think it's great, and I love thinking about it. Actually, let me do a couple call outs, and then I have some questions for you. So, Glenn is the first one in the house. Glenn, appreciate you being here. He's a subscriber, and we always like to recognize those guys. And then Pickles is number 2. Thanks for being here, Pickles. BR, another member, is in the house. In fact, I think this is the first time I've ever had all the comments have been from subscribers. So I'm moving up the chain, Vince.
There you go.
I got to tell you how good that warms my heart.
Yeah, it's great.
So let's talk about realignment a little bit, but I don't want to talk about anything that's happening over here quite yet. Tell us where Florida State ended up with the ACC. We know they had the gang of 7, if you want to call it that. That meeting occurred, and not a lot of news came out of it. And then things sort of quieted down. I'm sure that's okay with you because it was kind of annoying, I'm sure, at some point. But where did that end up? Where is the ACC and Florida State in particular?
I mean, the ACC in general is, dead man walking. You hear people talking about it in that form or fashion. The fact of the matter is that with the amount of money that we are locked into because of the grant of rights until, 2152, whatever the year is that we're getting out of that, it's not going to fly. And I think the more years that go by, the more possible it is for teams with the means and programs with the means and programs that want to play the biggest, competitive brand of football. They're going to find ways to get out. And but that stuff doesn't happen right away. I mean, I've been watching and paying attention to all, the Big 12 and the Pac-12 and all this stuff. And people expect this stuff to happen immediately. It doesn't, obviously. We all know we want it to because we're kind of we want things to happen now.
Right.
But the ACC is not anywhere closer to breaking apart, and when I say anywhere closer, I don't think that's happening in the next year.
Okay.
And the main, I mean, you saw the news the other day, which Ryan and I talked about it in our last show.
The CW.
All of a sudden, we've got a TV deal with the CW, which we can't chuckle about.
Right.
But right now we're just trying to make up the gap that exists right now in whatever form or fashion. There has been, a lot of hand wringing about, do we have the money to get out? Do we not have the money to get out? should we get out? Should we not? Where should we go?
Right.
Should we? Is the SEC the right place? Is the Big Ten the right place? And in the meantime, though, we have to make up some of the difference, and that's what I believe our athletic director is doing at this time. And I do believe that when you're talking about the group of seven or whatever they called it at that time, to me, that's kind of posturing. It's kind of putting pressure on, say, hey, we're serious about this.
Right.
Do we love the ACC? I can tell you as an FSU fan, I've never had any love for the conference. And mostly, because, Florida State joined in 1992, and the conference has done nothing to prop up its major brands of football
Right.
for a long, long time.
Well, yeah, ESPN's been taking advantage of you for years now.
Yeah, and shame on us, right? Shame on us. And these, you kind of have to do things the right way, and it has to be kind of hush hush in the back rooms and whatever. But at some point, Clemson, Florida State, Miami, UNC, and these larger brands that want to play big boy football,
right,
basically said, we have to do something. And if the conference is not going to do something, whether it's unequal revenue sharing, which we know, by the way, doesn't work long term, we know.
Yes.
Or wringing out the couch cushions to see what kind of change is available. If we're not going to seriously talk about those things, then there's no reason for us to promote any kind of conference front.
Right. So and I'm just thinking about this. I'm pondering how you guys handle that news when you hear the CW thing. Yeah, just so you know, the people I've talked to, we did chuckle and we did find it interesting. I don't think that's going to impact Florida State. I think most of those games are going to be tier 3 or what are lower division games. They're not going to probably have a name brand except for a very, very big, rare
Right.
occasion. But I think the idea is you're trying to find something different. Now, the ESPN sold those rights. You guys didn't even have a voice in it. They just basically said, we're going to subdivide some of our coverage. So how did that make you feel as a fan of a school that I know ESPN has been burning the ACC for a while, and I'm just wondering how that made you feel as a fan, and Ryan and you, how you've presented that moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even look at it so much as ESPN. I mean, they're not really the bad guy to me, right? I mean, if you had a sweet deal,
right,
what are you going to do to, take more money out of your pocket? I mean, for the greater good, they should. But we've
right,
seen them hemorrhaging talent, constantly. So
right,
they're not necessarily looking for opportunities to give more money. But the selling off of those rights, Raycom, I think, owns our third tier rights, and they've been around. They've been an ACC partner for decades and decades, and so it was Raycom that actually owns those rights that kind of sloughed that off to the CW, I think. If I'm understanding, the tiering,
right.
correctly.
It is kind of complex for sure. It's
yeah,
not
it is
simple.
It is, and in the long run, ESPN, in the long run, what I believe is that the schools that want to play the highest brand of football are not going to be able to do so in the ACC as currently structured.
Okay.
So if that's the case, and the ACC is not going to do anything to better that situation, then the only options are to leave. And then when you leave, then do you have options? That's the question. I think Florida State's brand, I think they do have options. I think Clemson does have options too.
Right.
I think, Miami does as well, even though, their brand is strong. How about that?
Yeah.
And I don't want to bash a rival necessarily today, right? I do that often, but they're not as strong from a top to bottom in terms of what they would bring to the Big Ten or the SEC as compared to, say, Florida State, Clemson. Like Florida State and Clemson are SEC type environments,
right?
That would
Miami doesn't have a stadium, right?
They do not.
Yeah, that's a problem.
They do not. And even if they had a stadium, even the stadium they have, their quarterback doesn't prefer playing in it. But that's a little jab at them.
Okay.
That's the fan in me coming out.
I hear you. Well, if so, let's just take that all aside, and let's not
Yeah.
worry about the structure of the ACC. In 4 years, and I say 4 years on purpose because 2026 is the new negotiation for college football playoff, and
Mhm.
that's going to cause, I think, some further moving. People are going to be jockeying between now and then. In 4 years, where is Florida State? I don't care about the other schools playing football.
It won't be the ACC. I'm pretty confident if you were going to ask me SEC or Big Ten, I would
Right.
say there's probably a 40% chance, 60% SEC, 40% chance Big Ten.
I think a Florida State yearly in conference would be fantastic.
I mean, we're already playing them.
Right.
So, I mean, and I'm not a conference waiver, and I've never been that. And so, to me, it's almost when you live in the Southeast, it is unbearable in a lot of ways to hear the SEC flag waving. Joe, just from a spite standpoint, I'm hoping that the Big Ten is the end result.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
yeah.
That's
Um,
interesting. So you would rather play northern games than stay in region.
Yeah, I mean, we're already playing Florida. We're already playing.
Right.
We already have that, and that's not going to go away. But when I was looking at the Big Ten and trying to think about um, how they could get into the Southeast, which
Right.
ultimately I think they want to do.
Sure.
Um, in my opinion, they do the march through the southern states. They pick a school from North Carolina, they pick a school from South Carolina, they pick a school from Georgia, and they pick a school from Florida. And if
Okay.
they do that, they get North Carolina, they get Clemson, they get Georgia Tech, and they get Florida State. And
Interesting.
if
Okay.
you have that, it's you've basically run the army, run the front lines through the SEC's front door,
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
Sherman's march to the sea, as it were. I got
yeah,
you.
exactly. And if
Okay.
they wanted to do that, um, I don't think any one of those four schools would, scoff at that. They would love to do that.
You and I can see the contrast, right? I understand why especially because talk about somebody who's been in the land of that times forgot. BYU has been the second sister to Utah for the last 13 years, 12 years, right? This is the 13th year, but they're now in both big conferences, and it's not a pleasant feeling to know that your rival is getting somewhere that you are not.
Absolutely.
And so I understand that feeling. I just find it interesting because the AAU that was given to Miami, I have to believe that them and Notre Dame, there was some signaling there that they're trying to get into the Big Ten. So if it has to be one of you, I thought it would be more Miami than Florida State. So this is interesting to me, and I think people that are watching have similar questions.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree that it may be, for the Big Ten standpoint, a toss up between the two schools. When I was looking at who was recently awarded AAU status,
Right.
it was, they showed that chart of how much research dollars each school was giving, right? Because
Right.
that's a big deal. That's a
It
big deal.
is. Yeah.
But if you look at the schools that got it and the schools that didn't, um, Florida State didn't not get in because of research dollars. They were well within the range of the schools that got it. So Florida State's been on this, I just used Norvell's term, on this climb for the
Right.
last, 10, 12 years of improving academics, research, and all that kind of stuff. Where at this point, we've been in the top 20 of public institutions for the last, I don't know, 6, 7 years.
Okay.
So academically, I mean, on a side note, on a personal note, there is no way that I would get into Florida State right now. Right? It is so difficult to get in. And
Right.
and I'm not an unintelligent person, but I can tell you that it is so difficult to get into that school right now. that, if you're talking about, academics and those kind of things, Florida State, there is not another school in the state of Florida that is tiers above the other in
Okay.
terms of academics or research dollars. I mean, if you have those thoughts internally, it is old news. It's old news that you're referring to. Okay, just
Okay.
so everybody is aware of that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
One of my viewers is Moen Vision. He's I don't know if you know him, but he's an Ohio State guy. So Big Ten, he represents that region of the world pretty well. And I just put up his comment. He says we only
Yeah.
need one Florida school, and Miami's it. The established rivalries. What do you take from that? Because I do know that Miami has traveled north to play games. I
They
just
have.
can't recall a lot of Florida State games north.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, at one point Miami was in the Big East. And
Right.
so they have some history of playing some northern teams. Not to mention, Catholics versus convicts was a big thing for a while,
Of
right?
course it was. You bet.
And and but also, I could probably give you a little bit of geography on how it's interesting how the east coast of Florida
Right.
is a lot of northeast transplants because of I-95.
Okay.
If you're on the west coast of Florida, there's a lot of Midwest transplants because of I-75 going up through Ohio and Michigan.
Okay.
So it's interesting that you would get, I mean, there are a lot of northern transplants in Florida in general.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, Florida State has played quite a few too. We've been playing Syracuse for a while. I mean, they're not a Big Ten school. I get it. But as far as northern rivalries,
Right.
Florida State went up to Michigan in 1991 and beat them like a drum.
Right.
But there, to say, it doesn't happen often. I mean, you play the teams that are on the schedule. Florida State was
Obviously. Yeah.
independent for a long time.
Right.
BYU was independent for a long time.
Yeah.
And you kind of cobble your schedule together based on what you can do. The difference between Florida State and Miami going to the Big Ten, and I think either one would be great, to be honest with you.
Okay.
But Florida State fans are going to travel, and where Miami fans, you may get a small contingent sometimes, but as far as traveling is concerned, if you want to get your opponent a kind of taste of the opponent fan base in your home stadium, Florida
Right.
State's going to travel better than they will.
I think I would agree with that. I can't recall, except for the Notre Dame game, where there was huge contingents of Miami fans traveling anywhere that was, less than 75 degrees and sunny. So
Yeah.
I think and this is, I would encourage Moen Vision to come and involve himself in your community and get on your show, because he has some really good insights, and I think you guys could trade some ideas. It would be interesting. In fact, let me open up. How long are you going to be here, by the way? I forgot.
Oh,
to
I'm
ask
here as
you.
long as you want me to be.
Oh, really? Okay, because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can go
yeah.
a long time.
We can
so
have
you're in trouble
yeah,
now.
we can have a great conversation. We can cover
Let's
it
do
all.
that, because I think Moen Vision, if he wants to talk, he's kind of like the snail. He doesn't poke his head out very often,
Yeah.
but when he does, he speaks loud and strong. Hey,
I got you.
Moen, if you want to join us, why don't you hop on that link? And because I'm learning here. This is a part of the country that I'm only tangentially involved with. I'm a college football file though, and I go all the way back to 1975 when I was 5 years old. So I can remember all these great rivalries.
Sure.
But it's interesting to actually hear people on the ground, and those opinions really matter. While we're waiting, if Moen Vision decides to join us, let me go through a couple comments here. BR, who's a subscriber, he says, does everyone agree that challenging the Gore in the ACC needs to start in early 2024 for it to be done by that 26th date? What do you think?
I mean, the earlier the better, because that
Right.
stuff's going to take time. And they've got that thing under lock and key. Like, the only way you can actually read that document is to physically go to Charlotte or wherever they're keeping the Ark of the Covenant.
Right, which seems just crazy to me. The first time I heard that, I thought it was a joke.
And
I
you
thought
actually
that
have to
was a joke.
physically go there and check it out of the library. I don't really understand all
And they
that. But
take your cell
anyway,
phones away from you and stuff too? I mean, is
I
it
think they
like
do.
FBI files?
It could be, it's
That
like
is crazy.
Mission Impossible. They got like heat sensors everywhere. Um, but
That
yeah,
is
I
really
mean,
funny.
yeah, the lawyers are going there and they're constantly reading it. And do I think there's a way out of it? I think there's a way out of everything.
Right, of course.
I
Oh,
think there's a
money
way out of
money gives
everything.
you, money out of access out of everything, absolutely.
But yeah,
I
I think if we don't see, we've got the ACC Media Days coming up next week,
okay,
and it'll be interesting. Ryan and I talked about this on our show last week. It's going to be interesting to hear the words that are cobbled together by the commissioner, and
okay.
and I don't fault him, by the way. He's only been there a year or two, and he basically was given, a ship with no rudder.
Is this Phillips? Do I have that name
Yeah,
right? Okay,
yeah.
alright.
This thing was already locked in, and so he's got to find a way, to like I said, appease the big boys.
Right.
When your rivals are lapping you in terms of dollars, and that's not an easy room to be in. But it'll be interesting to hear what he says. And I think everyone, no matter what he says, it's like a no win.
Yeah, I
Um,
believe that to be true.
unless they can have a restructuring of that deal. And let's be honest, the SEC deal, they're paying, the Vanderbilts of the world way more than they're bringing to the table,
Of course.
right?
Yeah, same thing goes with Big Ten schools. I mean, we can
Sure.
name them. Right.
In the ACC, they're paying Florida State way less than they bring to the table.
Of
So
course.
ESPN's in no hurry to level the playing field.
I appreciate that. And I think you've keyed into something that's really important, and that is there's only so much that's under control. Moen, before I turn the time over to you for a second, let me just bring this up, and we'll circle back on this. You mentioned Phillips may or may not say anything at his media days. Today it was just announced, not that there's a big shock here, that George Kliavkov isn't going to name anything for a media deal coming up either. and I think it's that better dead or red type thing. If you talk, you're only going to get crucified for it. So I think you're probably going to get very small data out of Phillips, just like I think on Friday we're going to hear nothing from the Pac-12. Moen, so I'm going to sit back and listen to you guys talk a little bit, kind of talk through, because I know I echoed what you had said, which was the Miami and the AAU and Notre Dame. Explain that a little bit, and you and Vince have a conversation here because I want to learn.
Okay, so Notre Dame and Miami getting into the AAU, it's not easy to get into the AAU. It is a quid pro quo that went on. Certain schools had to get in. You needed 15 of the Big Ten schools' votes to do that. So that's 15 schools voting for Miami, for Notre Dame, for ASU.
South Florida.
So,
yeah,
USF.
South Florida, right. So, I mean, I don't know if Florida State was up for contention. I don't know if they had all the boxes checked they need. I know it's not a big research thing with Notre Dame and Miami. It's in Miami, I think, only does a hair more research than Florida State does. But I've been told, the way I understand it, there's other factors, including the prestigiousness of your faculty, things like poet laureates, that,
right.
Things that really don't play into athletics that come into the AAU more often.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely more things than just the research dollars, and I don't have the resume checklist to know what those things are. But I also do agree with you that there is some level of being in the clique going on, right? So we're all going to vote on this, and if we don't, it doesn't matter what the resume says. If we don't want this school in, we're just going to vote no, right? So it's not necessarily if you check all the boxes, you're in my opinion. I may be wrong about that, but if Florida State is checking all the boxes and they're not getting in, then is there some kind of quota? They can only allow so many schools in at a time. I don't know. I mean, this thing is kind of hush hush as far as I know.
Right.
So, I mean, the flip side of that, though, like you said, all this poet laureate or others, the other things that may be part of, getting the gold star, what do they really have to do with with athletics? And not much.
No,
Not much.
not much at all. Right.
But what would having an institution like Florida State or Miami or whatever join the conference, what would that do in terms of bringing more dollars into the university? That's why I believe the AAU thing is not such a cut and dry. Either you have it, if you don't have it, you cannot get in. I don't believe that to be the case. I believe you have a much stronger case if you have it. But in the end, the dollars are going to speak. And if Florida State has the cachet, the eyeballs, and say they have 9 of the 10 other things, except for, this one thing,
right?
then I think there's no reason to not invite them. Me personally, I'll just tell you, I don't care whether we ever get AAU.
Right.
Except for the fact that if that is the barrier to entry to getting our school on a level playing field with other schools, including rivals.
How long does it take to get AAU status? If you put a stake in the ground today, and you guys might not know, and if you don't know, feel free to say you don't know, but if you put a stake in the ground today, how long does it take an average application process and everything to get AAU?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I don't know. Moen, do you know?
Fully honest with you, I have no idea.
I believe they just review it every year.
Yeah.
Oh,
and then whoever gets in, gets in.
Okay.
It might even be every 3 years, but it's definitely, there's politics involved with AAU.
Right.
That's the exact reason Nebraska got pushed out of AAU. Once they left the Big 12 for the Big 10, Texas made a big issue of their medical campus not being in Lincoln. And suddenly that was an enforceable rule. When before they left, they were completely fine with it. So
ironic, isn't it?
It is ironic, actually. Yes, it is. I got a comment here, super chat from Jared Jones, who's also an Ohio State guy. So Moen, he says he loves you, but he prefers FSU over Miami all day. You have any comments?
Yeah, I do too.
I do too.
But brands and rivalries, as we've talked about before,
right?
Miami has more natural rivals within the Big Ten. They have a rivalry with Penn State, Nebraska. You can even throw Ohio State in there off of the 2003 title game. If Notre Dame gets added, Catholics versus convicts.
Right.
Georgia Tech gets added, you got Georgia Tech.
All those schools you've named, I would posit that Florida State has just as much history with every one of those schools. I'll just leave that sit because, Florida State playing Nebraska in the 90s. I mean, Tom Osborne didn't get his titles until Florida State was done, in 92 beating them in the Orange Bowl, and 93 beating them in the Orange Bowl. Heck, Bobby Bowden went on the road to Nebraska and beat them there, right? So there's a long history there. Penn State, because of Joe Pa and Bobby beating, contemporaries, there's a long history there. Ohio State, there hasn't been as much there for sure. But the other schools, Notre Dame, I mean, the first game of the century was between Florida State and Notre Dame in 1993. It was the first college game day on campus, I believe, was that game.
Right.
And
I remember that game.
We lost that game. I was there. We lost that game. And then we ended up winning the title anyway, which Notre Dame fans are still mad about. And I don't blame them. I'd be mad too. But yeah, like I said, I don't know if there's any less history with those same schools than you just mentioned.
Sergeant Pickles has a comment here, and Moen, you can feel free to comment on this. He says, full bias. I think the argument for UW to become, again, those top 4 big choices, in whatever order, he has Notre Dame, FSU, UNC, and UW. I think because of the challenges with Stanford and their there's sharing of the research and whatnot. They would be also up there in front, but definitely, obviously, I value University of Washington very highly, and these are all contemporaries as far as I'm concerned. Do you guys disagree with those at all?
I was just in Washington about a month ago.
Oh, good.
My family and I went on an Alaskan cruise. We went through Seattle.
Oh, very
And
nice.
we spent one day, my daughters wanted to go look at the campus. And so we went to the Washington campus and walked around. It's beautiful.
It is.
Beautiful, beautiful campus.
Yeah, it's probably campus. The entire thing is probably the most beautiful in the country.
I just was floored by it. And I love college campuses, by the way. I go to all of them. If I have a chance to go see a college campus, I go because I love the environment. But yeah, I mean, UW for sure. I mean, why not? UNC, FSU, Notre Dame, I think eventually long term is going to be in the Big Ten. I think we all kind of agree on that. And then as far as Stanford and UVA, I mean, those are just high academic institutions. So, you know, they definitely got their ducks in a row when it comes to that.
Moen, did you want to add anything to that?
It ultimately comes down to how many teams are in the Big Ten.
If it's and 20, what the final number is, right? In the plan.
Right. If it's 20 or if it's 24. So, I mean, if we're sticking at 20, we're basically giving up on East Coast. We have to add some teams out west. If we go to 24, we can get both. As far as UVA goes, I view UVA as a consolation if they miss on UNC.
Right.
I think Miami, Georgia Tech, UNC/UVA, Notre Dame would be the four schools that would come from there, and then you'd have to grab another four from out west.
I don't disagree with those schools, by the way. I don't disagree. I just, you know, what's interesting about this is that both the SEC and the Big Ten, when the time comes, are going to have the choice. Like one of them is going to move before the other one. So it's like, who's going to pull the trigger first? And then, you know, all of those schools that are wanting to play big boy football and have the fan bases and the cachet will have a landing spot. I'm not concerned about that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. Greg Swaim, a partner of the YCSE, he says FSU will have a choice between Big and SEC. He thinks Miami will be the consolation. Moen, do you disagree with that?
No, I agree with that completely. And I think the SEC, I don't think the Big wants to get into a quote unquote pissing match with the SEC.
Right.
Everybody's going to end up having to be partners in this. So, you know, I mean, I can see them acquiescing and letting them have Florida State. I do think Florida State's a more attractive football brand to Miami. So they could maybe say, okay, we'll give you Florida State, but we'll give you Florida State, Clemson, you give us UNC and Miami, and we'll settle for Georgia Tech, and you guys can grab Virginia Tech and Virginia and North Carolina State.
It'll be a great land swap, is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah. Right.
Seriously, it sounds like a land swap. Jared, another comment says anything over 20 makes for brutal scheduling. That's definitely a consideration. 20 schools play 199. I mean, we're getting to a point. 16 is ideal. Anything past 16, and you're starting to really stretch boundaries, especially if you're a geographical conference like the Big 12 is trying to be from coast to coast. That's hard to do.
That's true, but if you get to 24, you can do pod scheduling and you can get to more regional pods with less travel.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would say it's almost like there's this no man's land between 16 and 24, right?
Yeah.
You want to, and that's probably why, you know, the conferences are kind of holding pat until they have a chance to maybe jump that no man's land, where they can make it easier for scheduling, where you can have regional rivalries that'll continue, and you don't have to break the bank on travel, you know, because it's not just about football, right? That's what we love. But it's not just about football, and you're going to have other sports too. And I don't know, I don't know about you guys, but I do enjoy all the other sports too, and some more than others for sure. But those teams are going to have to travel too.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so we've talked about the fun stuff. Now let's talk about the yucky stuff. Pac-12 media days are Friday, and there was an announcement basically put out to the world via 16 sports writers that there was going to be no media deal, not discussions, but no announcement of a media deal on Friday. And I really respect you guys' opinions. So where do you, Vince, you can speak as little or as much as you want to on it, but I know Moen has an opinion on it. Where do you think the Pac-12 goes now?
I'll let Moen start. I need to think about it a little bit.
I still stand with Colorado leaving, followed in short order by Arizona. The other 8 will stick together and backfill. Add San Diego State and Colorado State. Take whatever deal they can get, and they're going to wait to see what the Big Ten does. Try and make themselves as attractive candidates as possible to get into the Big Two. Doesn't work out for them, they can always fall back onto the Big 12.
So just to follow up, you're pretty sure that Oregon and Washington will not get auto invites once the Arizona and Colorado leave?
I don't think anybody will get a Big Ten invite till 2026 at the earliest.
Okay. All right. Vince, what do you think?
I mean, it doesn't make sense for any of these schools to show their hand until they know what the numbers are.
Right.
And I mean, wasn't there a school recently that started the ball rolling and then had to backtrack on it?
San Diego
right?
State. Yeah. Basically said we're leaving and then backtracked the last minute. Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, it doesn't, it's like, you know, you got this girl that you want to ask out, right? And she's like, well, maybe, but you never get the final answer, right? And it's like, but are you going to stop? Are you going to stop until you get the final no? So are they going to actually, you know, bolt until they know what the final number is? Probably not. And it makes sense, I think, even though I hate it, it makes sense for the conference, the Pac-12, to hold on to those things to the vest as long as they possibly can, to lock in the schools as long as they possibly can. I don't think the numbers are going to be great.
Right.
And you guys know a lot more about that than me, but just from the stuff that I've read, I don't think the numbers going to come across the table are going to be great. But it's also going to be different. You know, whatever comes across the table is going to be a lot of streaming, right? And a lot of that kind of stuff, which is, you know, we look at it from, you know, kind of back, you know, looking back on it where, you know, streaming isn't the way to go. You need to blah, blah. You need to do it this way because this is the way we've always done it. But that doesn't mean that streaming won't work. There are a lot of streaming entities out there that are, you know, going to be taking over. and they're going to be the ones driving the train. So I don't necessarily know that just because things are involved with streaming, that's necessarily a bad thing long term.
I think that's fair. I one thing about it, we know for sure that we don't know everything that's going on. Anybody who says they do know is lying. So I think going forward, it's one of those things that something has to break. We're just not sure what and when. But I'm with Mo, and I think probably Monday or Tuesday, just on a flyer, get over the weekend, let some things progress. Brett Yormark's out of town. He's in Italy this week, so. I definitely would have everybody watching the news next week for sure.
Yeah. Always watching the news.
Right, of course.
Always.
Sergeant Pickles, has a comment about the scheduling and the games in conference, and you can tell me what the ACC is right now. He says, don't think it's unreasonable for these possible super conferences to go to 10 or 11 in-game conference schedules. What is the ACC right now? How many games in conference?
Gosh, they are, 8 conference games?
Okay. And what's the SEC? Do you guys know?
I think they're 8 as well.
SEC's 8.
Yeah.
Is the ACC 8 or 9? Is it 8?
I think they're 8 because I'm thinking about. I think about it in terms of like when I look at the standings. Our wins and losses for the conference always add up to 8. That's how my brain works.
Okay.
Mostly losses more recently than wins.
Yeah, and that suck. Yeah.
But you know, Florida State or the ACC also has this, you know, agreement with Notre Dame, and they're cycling through and playing ACC games as part of that partnership.
Right.
So you get Notre Dame on your schedule, and not that that's a conference game necessarily when you play them, but that is something that's kind of factored in to the schedule if they happen to be rotating into your schedule at that time.
Okay. And Moen, what's the Big Ten?
Big Ten's at 9 right now.
And that's where the Big 12
Um,
is as well.
Right, but
Yeah.
ultimately they will get to 10. I mean, that's what we're going to look at. We're going to get 10, 2 out of conference games. And I think that 10th game will end up being a sort of, especially if we get to 24, I think you're going to have your 4 pod champions playing that 10th game and then ranked, a ranked way for the rest of the teams to play that 10th week. And then those 2 winners would advance to the Big Ten championship.
What that means is that these smaller conferences, there's just going to be less and less crossover where they get to play big time games and get more money. I mean, it's just, unfortunately, it's the
Well,
eating their young.
the thing
type
with
of a thing.
Ohio State, at least because of how much money that brings in for these small schools,
Right.
Ohio State always schedules a small Ohio school.
Like
that's
Cincinnati
their- Yeah,
Right,
Cincinnati, Kent State, Akron.
okay.
That's more or less a given. We're going to always schedule one of those schools.
I mean,
It-
I think that there's some great value in history there, and kind of taking care of your own by the larger schools playing the smaller schools for the big paycheck, and
Right.
that's always gone on. There'll be less of that, but I also think, once this thing really starts to unravel, or ravel, depending on the way you want to look at it, then these schools that are smaller that maybe are not going to be in the big boy conferences,
Right.
those smaller conferences, there's going to be a market for that, probably more so than there is now. And those smaller market teams, smaller conference teams, there'll be a lot of competitive, interesting games and matchups, and who knows where that could go.
I think there's a lot of play there, and maybe they end up doing some subdivision games where they're playing and they create, like, the MAC plays against the Sun Belt, or the AAC plays against the Mountain West, and they create their own champion, and then they put that forward to a playoff if that's the best of the group. Definitely,
I
there's
love it.
some, yeah. I think, and there's some good football there. I mean, we're talking about. I would love to see Boise State playing big time football. They're a program that has been willing to, like BYU did for a lot of years, to travel everywhere, and they'll play
Mhm.
anybody anytime. And I really value that. I think that they're brave in doing those scheduling things, and I think they eventually they should be rewarded. But who knows where we're going? 2026 is literally going to be, I think, one of those fracture dates we're going to look back on. Like 1984 was a fracture date. I think 2026 is going to be one of those as well.
Agreed.
You want to add anything to that, Moen?
No, I think it's important, though, even with these conference realignment, to protect rivalries as much as possible. I'd like to see it put into law, in particular in Iowa and Iowa State, making sure that rivalry takes place every year.
Right.
There's just, the rivalry should be maintained. If Oregon makes it into the Big Ten, I think Oregon State should be a protected rivalry.
Right.
If Washington makes it into the Big Ten, Washington State should be a protected rivalry. There's no need to lose these rivalries just because of realignment. I think there's still important rivalries in a lot of ways, because there's been a lot of Iowa teams that didn't quite make it because they lost to Iowa State.
They have had some issues with that. Yes. Yeah. Greg has a comment here. He's saying there's more Big 12 fans going to be watching Pac-12 media days. I think that's probably true. We've turned it into a parlor game. So I should probably do some sort of a lottery. I'm going to be watching it live. I have Friday off.
There's going to be more fans of all conferences watching that. Who doesn't love a train wreck?
I'm doing a show with another guy from Minnesota, a big guy you guys probably recognize, on Friday night, and we're going to talk about nothing but what the next steps are for the Pac-12, and that'll be fun.
You called it the parlor games, as you called it? Yeah.
It is a parlor game.
It's like Dion in the conference room with a cowboy hat. Yes.
I love that.
It's great. Like Clue. It's like
Clue. It is Clue. Okay, I'm going to steal that, Vince, and I'm going to use that in the show later in the week. The parlor game is Clue, and it'll be. So let's get that right. It's going to be Dion with the candlestick in the billiards room.
Yeah, Dion in the conference room with a
Okay,
cowboy
conference
hat.
room. All right, cowboy hat.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
cowboy hat was a Monopoly piece, but that's okay.
That's all right.
Let's see. I'm going to go to another comment from BR, who's a subscriber. If you want your comments read, either do a super chat or you can subscribe to the show. Those are the ones that they are different color for me, so I'll pull those up on more often than just anybody else's comments. BR says, what teams will be left out of the P5 if the ACC breaks up, and where will they go? Same question for the Pac. That's a great question for one. It's
what
a great
teams
question.
will be left out? I mean,
Yeah.
what are we considering the Power 5?
Well, I would say it would be at that point it'd be Power 3.
Yeah,
If you have
agreed.
the Pac-12 and the ACC blow up, you'd have some remnant teams that didn't get the call up, right?
Yeah, so
And
I
who
just
would
kind
they be?
of list them off here. So if the ACC were to basically say, you know, there's no way we can get around this, we're just going to let everybody get out, do what they're going to do.
Right.
Then, you know, you've got as far as the Big Ten and the SEC, you've got Florida State, Clemson, Miami, UNC, probably Virginia Tech.
And Virginia. I think both.
And Virginia.
Yeah.
Right. And then I'm trying to think, you know, Pitt could be valuable.
They do a ton of research. We did some on one of our shorts. Me and you did a thing on them, and they do a ton of research.
And then the teams that are kind of, I don't want to say left out, but the teams that would, you know, this is a boon for the Big 12, to be honest with you.
Oh, absolutely it is. It's a survival step is what it is.
Think about, I don't want to say think about what's left over because it's more than that. I mean, these teams are NC State, very passionate fan base and a up and coming team, and they're, you know, they're just a good program.
Right.
Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
You know,
although Mullen says Georgia Tech's going to the Big Ten.
Yeah, they're kind of on the fence for me, just because they have been so mediocre to bad in football for quite a long time. The people that are left out are kind of who you would think. I think, you know, Wake Forest,
Boston College, Syracuse.
Yeah, Syracuse has some history long ago, for sure.
Right.
There might be some value Big Ten there, maybe. But yeah, I mean, Wake Forest, Duke.
Yeah, Duke is another one. Yeah, and
they're a big
Louisville.
brand.
Louisville is another one.
Louisville, Big 12, all over it. In my opinion.
Yeah, I think they already have they've already received their invite.
Think about those three conferences.
Yeah,
if those are the three, how and I'm kind of an old school guy. I don't want to say I don't love change necessarily, but I know it's going to happen.
Right.
But if we are going to go to whatever this is going to be, think about those three conferences.
Oh, I think it'd be fantastic.
Oh man, it would be phenomenal. It would be phenomenal.
Yeah, it really would. Mullen, and I think we can already say the four in the Pac-12 are Stanford, Cal, Washington State, and Oregon State.
Oregon State, which I think they would just backfill with Mountain West teams.
Right,
right. And stay the Pac. Right. Stay the Pac. As far as the ACC, Wake Forest and Boston College would be the two biggest.
Yeah.
I think
casualties.
Casualties. Yeah. I think everybody else would find a home in the Big Ten, SEC, or the Big 12. Again, depending on how big the Big 12 wants to get.
Right.
I think if the Big 12 swells to 24, Louisville, Pitt would be incredible ads for them to go with West Virginia. Syracuse would be another good ad to get into the New York market. At that point, if they really wanted UConn, that would be the point that they would take UConn.
I think that's their only life raft. If they don't get it, then I don't think they're going to get it. I don't think it's going to come, and I know I've got a lot of UConn watchers of my shows. I'm a champion of UConn. I'd like to have them in. Just the perception deal is a real thing. You guys both know that. Out in the world, perception carries a lot more weight than even dollars and cents in a lot of ways. So that they just let football go for a little bit, and it's a problem. Let's see here. Let me get some comments in here. C. John says, my dream is FSU, KSU, LSU, and PSU
all the
in
states.
The CFP.
All the state universities.
Yeah.
That would be fun. I'd watch that. I think that would be an
fantastic.
entertaining playoff. Let's see. Pickles talking to Greg Swim. He says, in a rowboat laughing at the pack life raft as the big and the SEC mega yachts float by. I envy that level of selective spite. And we all know Greg's good at that.
Yeah, Greg will throw the zingers in there all day long. I love it.
Yeah, I do too. It's all in good fun. If you guys
It
are
is.
engaging with Greg Swain, just know it's all in good fun. He has a good sense of humor and don't take anything too seriously. Let's see here. We can get a couple more comments in, and then I was going to take calls when we were going to talk more about the realignment. You can stick around if you want to, Vince.
Sure.
And I'm going to see if anybody that's watching wants to actually join us. That's totally up to you. Let's see here. Pickles says, Greg Swim, give me one reason why any of the media days are interesting. Pre-alignment, it was all just answering generic questions. I think without realignment, they're nothing, are they? Do you guys have you?
Oh no, you get some great sound bites. No, coach sound bites out of media days. Jimbo Fisher last year going after Nick Saban.
That's true. Actually, that's right.
I mean, that's high entertainment in my mind. That's the perfect kind of violence I love to see. SEC on SEC violence. I love it.
Jimbo's doing it again this year, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I have a history with that scenario. And Jimbo is he's making a lot of money and he feels confident right now. He doesn't feel like there's anybody running the ship but him, so he can say and do what he wants. And if he doesn't want Bobby Petrino to call any plays, Bobby Petrino will not call one play.
I just don't. He's running it was already Texas A&M's always that program that everybody thinks is going to break through. This is going to be the year, right? How long have we been here? We've been here since I was in elementary school. I even had a Texas A&M hat. I bought into that growing up. It's like the wrecking crew and all that nonsense you fought. This is the year that Texas A&M is going to break through, and I've seen no indications that is going to happen.
It's not for lack of spending, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
they and they have the coffers to do what needs to be done, whether it's facilities or donors for NIL, whatever. I mean, they've got it.
Right.
So it's not that. So what else is it then? And I'll just say, if I'm going to look backward, when that finally went down for us and somebody finally called Jimbo's bluff, make him make a decision, a lot of the Florida State fan base was happy that was over.
Really? You guys were ready to see him go, huh?
Yeah.
Even after Natty.
Yeah, I mean, you'll have Florida fans will say, "Well, Jimbo Fisher's like our Urban Meyer."
Oh, okay.
And don't get me wrong, he might be a great guy. I don't know him, but there was enough smoke about what was not going on at that program for the last year and a half while he was courting other offers.
Right.
That what? Thank you for the championship. I hope you enjoy the rest of your life. And Texas A&M, thank you for releasing us of this albatross of a contract we had with him.
I find it remarkable anybody paid.
Yeah.
I mean, that money
this will be the year.
This will be the year.
This will be the year.
Write it down.
This will be the year. The boosters pay a boatload of money to get rid of Jimbo Fisher and bring in Urban Meyer. I'm calling it right now.
I was in an Uber.
Jimbo Fisher and give him Urban.
I was in an Uber, I guess it was during Christmas time, maybe. And the driver, I actually talked to the Uber drivers. I'm one of those, was a Texas A&M fan. And I asked the driver, so what do you think about Jimbo? And the driver said, this year better be better.
Wow. Okay.
So, I mean, random fan, right? Random fan, but
right.
Still.
But they're getting tired. I mean, they're just getting worn out. And I think having the #1 recruiting class for as long as they did and winning 4 games, that can't look good on a resume. So, yeah. Anyway, Pickles is going back to Greg Swaim. He's saying he's confident enough he wants Greg to offer him a formal apology if the pack matches or exceeds the Big 12 money. There you go, Greg. He's calling you out. And Greg answered it saying, sure. So there you go. You heard it here first. Somebody's going to be doing something once that gets done. Bill G, who's also a loyal subscriber, he says Urban Meyer would be perfect for A&M.
I
I
agree.
think he would be. Doesn't he
I
have
mean,
like a
and-
brain thing or something?
It was a heart
You know what?
palpitation or
With
something.
it
Is
was
that
a
what it
heart
is?
before that. He gets so stressed out, and I think his wife doesn't want him to be a coach anymore. But
Oh,
he's not going to let what happened in Jacksonville be his defining moment. And I can't say anything bad about the guy because everywhere he goes, he wins.
He does. He does.
So
Yeah. His dream job was always Notre Dame, though, and the fact that he didn't try to chase that down when it came open, I thought was remarkable. Yeah.
well, I think
Anyway.
that was because of his wife too at the time. I mean,
Right. Okay.
you may not remember what happened with the certain videotape recorded inside.
No,
his
I remember.
restaurant.
I remember with it. Yeah.
Okay.
I was
Okay,
tracking
so
that.
I think Shelley had a short leash on him at that
Does
point.
he
but
still own that bar?
No. no,
Okay.
he-
She
he
made
got
him
rid
sell
of
it, huh?
Yep, sold it.
Well,
Sold
good
it.
for her. She's got a little self-respect at least.
Yeah.
I think he wins games, but yeah, I think there's something off about him. I don't know
Yeah,
what it
I
is.
mean, if winning is all that matters,
Yeah.
I mean,
Urban's
we
your
can
guy.
have that. We can have that philosophical discussion. If winning is all that
Yeah.
matters,
Right.
then he may be your guy. But you know, a lot of my friends that are Florida fans have no love lost for him either.
Well, I think that's
Interesting,
you
right?
you get what you pay for, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we didn't get any big comments lighting up the stage, so I think we're going to call it good. Vince, why don't you tell everybody about your show? I'll bring your page up again, and you can
Sure.
tell us why it's important for them to tune in.
Garnet and Old, Ryan and I are doing this show weekly right now during the off season. Thursdays at 7. It is obviously Florida State focused. It is ACC focused to a degree. We talk more than just football. We also talk other sports as well. We also talk about college football history and rivalry and tradition too. So. And we're just two fans. Like I brought up at the beginning of the show, we're just two fans and just loving the banter. And so we do the same kind of setup as you here, Nathan. We have comments and chat and people join in, and it's the same kind of deal. Going in the fall, obviously there's a lot more going on with pregame shows and halftime shows live from Tallahassee, and then some events at a local brewery here in Jacksonville, if any of you are going to be in the area.
All right, everybody, we'll look him up, follow him, and tune in his show once a week, and then he'll be doing pre and post game throughout the season. So I'm sure that talk will really rev up as we get closer to the year. All right, I think we're going to sign off. Moen, you want to say anything else before you take off tonight?
Let's get a plug in for the James Cancer Hospital at Ohio State. Doing some great work. I was down there late last week. I'll be down there again Thursday doing some video work. So if anybody's looking to spend some money to a good cause, put it towards cancer research.
Moen, if you'll send me the link, I'll start bringing that up when you're on. I can share that webpage and we can have everybody get more information actually from the site. And I'd be happy to bump that for you.
Roger that. I'll send that through a DM.
All right, no problem. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. This was fun tonight. I normally don't do Tuesday and Thursday shows when, anyways, whatever. But I appreciate you guys being here on short notice, and I appreciate the conversation. Vince, just let me know when you want me on your show. I'll be happy to attend. And
absolutely.
I'm looking forward to football. So let's get past some of this other nonsense and start playing games.
I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. Thanks,
Nathan. All right, everybody, have a great
Vince.
night. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.